Welcome to our next episode of Marketing on Tap. I am Sam Fiorella, and this is my mate, Danny Brown. Today, we want to talk about an interesting one. It's really right for the times, in fact, and it's Ketchup Wars. I was really fascinated with a story that I read, that I've been reading about, but there's one article in particular on CBC News talked about Ketchup Wars. And I guess to preface the conversation that I want to have today, Danny, it's about French's ketchup and Heinz ketchup, of all the things we're going to talk about. And basically, the story here is in retaliation to Donald Trump's, or I guess America's taxes on Canadian, or tariffs, Canadian aluminum and steel. The Canadian government has said, well, if you're going to tax us, we're going to tax you where it hurts. And where does it hurt more than ketchup, apparently? So Heinz is getting, not just ketchup, they're getting an extra 10% tariff added.
On rye as well, right?
On rye, coffee,
and
jeans. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there's all kinds of things that they produce. But the ketchup one is what I want to focus on today, because before all of this happened, Heinz, the iconic brand. I mean, there is really no other brand. Right. Growing up, it was Heinz. You would say, like Kleenex. You wouldn't say, I want a tissue. I want a Kleenex. Here, give me the Heinz. So it's so iconic. But what's fascinating right now is that they pulled out of the Canadian market. So they're still selling here, but they don't manufacture their ketchup here anymore. Right. There is a plant in Leamington, Ontario, where they would source their local tomatoes and actually manufacture right here, or at a minimum, process the tomatoes here. They left, and French's, a similar brand, also American, also makes mustard and ketchup and all the rest of the condiments, amongst other things. They said, well, we're going to take over because the plant is already there. We know the tomatoes are there. And so they've been quietly going about their business. But they haven't really had a lot of success against the Heinz brand. And what happened, of course, now with this whole tariff thing, Canadians are starting to say, well, hold on. Yeah, Heinz left. They're now fully an American company. And French is a Canadian company, but at least they're here. They're sourcing our tomatoes. So we got to buy Canadian.
All right, exactly.
And I'm not sure if everybody realizes that French is actually an American brand, but at least they're giving Canadians jobs. And so in retaliation to all this whole political mess, this is what's happening. And interesting, Loblaws, one of the biggest grocery chains here, had, before all of this happened, pulled Heinz from the shelf because the sales weren't there, I guess, and they were going to focus on Heinz. So they pulled French's. But then everybody started complaining online and making a big deal. Well, I want something that's more Canadian. Right. And so they had to bring it back. Anyway, long story short, what today where we are, and we're only a month into this whole boycott thing and the tariffs that are being employed, Heinz is down 5%. In terms of sales here in Canada, and French's is actually increased by $11 million in sales, period over period. So I think that's just absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, exactly.
And I want to talk about this ketchup war and how politics and marketing mix, and if they should mix, and can one avoid the other.
Right.
So before I have that conversation, though, you just poured something really interesting. What are we drinking today?
So today we've got Side Launch. It's their wheat beer, Side Launch Brewing Company.
Nice.
They're over in Collingwood, Ontario. This is a great beer for summer. It's really refreshing, lots of lemon, zest, citrus coming through. Really clear beer, as you can see. A little bit hazy, but wheat beer, but taste-wise, it's really clear beer. It's only about sitting at 5.3% ABV, so it's not a heavy beer to drink. And on a summer day like this, we're looking outside at the sunshine. It's bang on. So,
and you said they're in Collingwood?
They're in Collingwood. You can check them out. They were actually the 2016 Canadian Brewery of the Year. Oh, wow. They're in Collingwood, Ontario, so just up the road from us.
I like it.
Side Launch Brewing Company. SideLaunchBrewing.com. Yeah, SideLaunchBrewing.com. So cheers.
All right, cheers.
Cheers.
Ooh. Yeah, that orangey, lemony zest that comes through.
Hits you right away. It's like I say,
that's fantastic.
Yeah, and 5.3, you could drink a good few of them and not be too, overly concerned.
Okay, so somewhere in the world, it's 4:00 in the afternoon. It may only be before noon here, but
a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's so that's we're working on that time. So anyway, thank you very much. And we are not sponsored by any of these beers, by the way, just in case, or any of these breweries. If anybody's wondering, these are just
breweries we like and
breweries
appreciate.
that we like and we appreciate. I really like this one here. That's fantastic. Thank you for pouring.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk then a little bit about this whole ketchup war thing. Politics aside, what impact can marketing really have in a struggle like this?
Yeah.
It started with politics. I mean, this whole thing was happening with Heinz pulling out of Canada. Nobody paid attention when they pulled out of Canada. We were still buying it. It was still the number one brand, no issues. Can marketing actually be removed from it? Can we ignore politics, or do we have to hit it head on now?
Yeah, I think, as the results shown in the financials, marketing impacts the politics side of it and vice versa. I know in the last week or two alone, Heinz has started a big PR campaign to reclaim how we never really left Canada. We're still sourcing tomatoes, etc. Yeah. And we're still there selling, the products. We never really left Canada. But a lot of analysts said, well, you kind of did because you're not here. And now the Canadian consumers are seeing that and it's impacting. So the decision was made, and I know it wasn't made based on Trump's, since tariffs, what have you. But with that background and the fact that Heinz had already pulled out and they're now seen as trying to come after this Canadian company that stayed here, then it's going to take a huge marketing message to actually get, back into consumer trust if they can.
Well, I think it really highlights the importance of marketing and PR to any brand in particular. Like the fact that French's is an American company, but because they source here and they actually employ Canadians in a company or in a factory here. Canadians are wrapping the Canadian flag around it, and they're getting behind the brand in to the tune of $11 million extra dollars, and forcing Loblaws as one to bring it back onto the shelves. So clearly, marketing has to be in place here. The thing, though, for me is when is it too late? So Heinz, as you said, has put a big PR blitz on, but nobody's buying it. Right. Canadians are still rejecting it, which is something I thought I would never see. An iconic brand like Heinz. As I said, growing up, it was Heinz or nothing. Even other brands were considered store brands, even if they weren't, or no-name brands. But obviously that's changing. So I'm thinking, what does a brand have to do today to stay ahead of something like this so that they're not caught on their heels the way that Heinz was? Do we need to adopt local? Is being made locally, paying people locally, employing people locally? Is that something that we just have to make part of our daily mix now in anticipation of what's happening in the globe with this whole make America great, buy local, all that kind of stuff?
Well, I think just look at the craft beer industry against the corporate brewers, right? A lot of people prefer to try either buy it at the brewery direct or try, get it from the local LCBO, as opposed to supporting big brewers and supporting Canadian and local businesses. Could be American craft. So to Ketchup and to the sauce wars, if you like. I think at some stage it does get too late. You can't actually change perception. And Canadians were very polite. We know that, and we always apologize, and we always accept apologies. But sometimes I don't think we do accept if we're seeing Canadian values being challenged by an outsider, especially in the climate that it is at the moment, where Trump's very much made it about America first over everybody else, which is his mandate. But then he has to expect that countries are going to, retaliate, whether it's the government or the consumers that buy products from the shelves.
Yeah, well, and I think this was what's interesting is when this whole political movement started and Trump started what was campaigning, and it was all about Make America Great Again. The vibe, at least from a PR perspective in Canada, and I would assume it's the same around the rest of the world, was, okay, well, good for them. It was, that's their prerogative, not an issue. But today it's less about us first, it's us against you.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You know what I mean? And it's coming across that way. And I think that's part of the reason why there's been such a backlash against brands that aren't Canadian, because we're now saying, okay, well, if you're going to be against us, we're then going to be against you because we need to protect ourselves.
Yeah.
Because it's almost predatory what you're doing as opposed to protectionism, for your own country, which everybody would understand. All right. So I think this is really an interesting thing to analyze. How would we do it differently, or what should they do? So we've got two two sides of the coin here. We have French's that kind of stumbled into this
Right.
to their luck.
Happy accident.
They didn't know that this was coming. They just saw an opportunity to take over a plant that already had people, trained people, and a great growing community. So they decided to take it over. So now they're in a good position. How do they maximize this? Should they be riding on it, or do they run the risk of saying, you're wading into politics?
Yeah. I don't think they need to wade into politics. They certainly should maximize the fact they're still here.
Yeah.
They're employing Canadian people, making a Canadian product, if you like. So if it comes down to, maximizing it, just play that story, and start sharing human stories of the people that they're keeping in a job. So you get the employees sharing little micro videos saying, this is why I love working at French's, versus if they wanted to go the whole, adversarial way, this is why I prefer French's over Ketchup. So they could do that in a kind of fun way, and then maximize that onto the consumer side and just have these little ads propagating out.
Sure.
And even do like an almost mini influence campaign about this is why local, products work over the larger big boys.
See, I think that's a really interesting thing. I don't have a pen here to make some notes. This is completely unscripted, by the way, other than, reading the article and taking some notes on the article that spurred this conversation. I wish I had just to say, that's a great idea for our last call. But I agree. So you either have the option of playing up the local, buy local, which may be a little, sure, now you're just jumping on the bandwagon. But I love the idea of having it from the perspective of the employees. Like I definitely would showcase the fact that, here's our employees, here's what we're doing to the economy here. That's a subtle way of playing into this whole political theme that's happening or playing out right now in our daily conversations without actually hitting you over the head with it. Of course, they do run the risk of somebody finally saying, well, you're not really Canadian, you're American. But I think people can forgive that as long as you're employing people here. Right. It's one of the reasons why I know some people buy Ford cars. It's an American-made car or a German car, but they look, is it actually made locally?
Right, exactly.
Is it employing Canadians? Well, let's flip this. Let's take a look at Heinz now.
Okay.
So Heinz is on the bad side of this, or the wrong side of this, I guess, happenstance, right? They pulled out for whatever reason. I'm not even sure, actually, the reason that they pulled out. I'm assuming it was for some economic reason.
Subsidy or something like that.
Was it a subsidy?
I think if I recall, there was a lack of subsidy from the Ontario government at the time.
Okay, well, so there was some business reason, some financial reason that they chose to live. I should have looked that up. But for whatever reason, they're now on the back foot. They're on their heels. What could they possibly do? The PR campaign is not working. What else could they possibly do?
Apologize. No. It's a tough one because they're, like you say, it's already backfired.
I think it's typical. How long have you been in Canada?
16 years, 17 years now. Almost.
Hold on, what?
No, 2006, so 13 years.
You've been here for 13 years and you still talk like that?
I know, right, exactly. Well, I got to try. I talk to my mom every now and again just to keep the accent going. But,
okay, well, that's. I didn't actually call that out because I wanted to slam the way you speak.
Yeah.
Although we should maybe focus on that a little bit, but that'll be subject of another podcast. But I guess the idea here is that after so many years, they could have had that impact. They could have made that happen, and they didn't.
Yeah.
Right. So how do we then say you've got this history here? The fact that you're Canadian, which is the point I was trying to make earlier. Right, yeah. The fact that you say your first option, well, they can apologize.
Yeah.
How Canadian are you? 13 years, osmosis has worked and it's pulled in. So I think that's kind of funny. But okay, other than apologizing, sorry. I had to throw that dig in there. Other than apologizing, what could they do?
I think all they can do if they really want to get back into Canada in any meaningful way is some form of grassroots. Take one step at a time and do instead of say, or do instead of promote, and just actually come out a year later and say, hey, you know what, we screwed up. We're doing this, and source, even if it's not a major step, just show we're back in Canada. If they want to come back, and they clearly do because they're having an impact on their sales and profits, so they need to get these customers back. But it depends on what they're allowed to do and whether the current government over in the US will allow them to come back as opposed to stay in the US where US workers are. Yeah,
I agree. All right, I'm getting the signal. Last call. We got to get a bell. Robert, get us a bell so that you can just hit ding, 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 ding when we're done here. Okay, so last call. We always want to leave these with a actionable tidbit that they can walk away with? What would we pull out of this conversation? What can they pull out? So what's your last final thought on this?
I think obviously politics and marketing is never a great mix. And if a business or a brand has any inclination that something is about to happen because of politics, they have to have a plan in place that says we can't get sucked into this. It's going to look like, we're pulling out because Canada did this or the US asked this. But we have to have a strong communication plan that shows we're stuck in the middle, guys, but we're here to support you if you're going to support us. This is how we work together, that kind of thing.
So have a plan in place for this. If you're not going to dive into it right away, knowing that politics is actually mingling with your marketing right now, have a plan ready to execute or try and get ahead of it.
Yeah.
For me, I think in terms of an actionable result, one of the things you mentioned that I was going to write a note on is the campaign of apologizing is actually not such a bad idea. And this is a takeaway that maybe people want to think about. Think about what McDonald's did here in Canada in particular, with all of the negative news in the United States about how bad the food was for you. And, there was like very little redeeming value other than it just tastes fantastic. But, from a health-wise, but here in Canada, we were worried about like what was in the hamburgers. It wasn't 100% beef. And so they created that big campaign. It wasn't necessarily an apology, but ask any question.
Right. Yeah.
Ask us what's in a McNugget.
Well,
Is it really good?
site, right?
Right. They had that whole site, which was nothing but live questions and honest answers, and they were very transparent. So this is an interesting lesson learned, maybe, that could be taken away here that I really like. Heinz could actually take a similar approach. Like, we say we never left Canada, so ask us.
Right.
Open up a dialogue with Canadians, and that transparency, if they're truly willing to be transparent, and if they haven't really left or
what
positioned
were you doing in the meantime, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So that would be maybe an approach that I would take as an actionable marketing item. Anyway, that's it for today's. Our time is up. We're a few minutes over. Thanks everybody for joining us again for this Marketing on Tap episode. Join us again next week. We're going to be sampling another craft brew and tackling another marketing project.
As always.
Thanks, Danny. See you guys next week.
Cheers.
Cheers, everyone.